This podcast contains material that is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all listeners. Enjoy.
Sorry, we're closed.
Well, then what are all these people doing here?
Drinking and having a good time.
Well, that's why we're here.
You're too stupid to have a good time.
I don't want to get on the bandwagon. I'll burn that wagon down and join the band. Traveling troubadours terrorizing street corners just to try to get some supper in our hands. Now I waited all my life to get this off my chest, scream bloody murder until someone understands that it ain't about the money, the drugs, or the women. I make this noise just because I can. And we'll all join in to that original sin. So let's get rowdy and reckless. Let's get rowdy and reckless. Let's get rowdy and reckless. Just for the hell of it.
Hello and welcome back to Old Man Strength, a podcast of the Tailgate Society and brought to you by Deadeye Barbecue Sauce, the best damn barbecue sauce in the known universe. I am Tim Johnson, joined as always by Chris Shipley. Chris, how are we doing this evening?
We are doing wonderful. How are you, Tim?
I am doing well. Spring is actually kind of fully sprung here, at least in Minnesota. You guys have probably been a little bit more spring-like. I think you've already mowed your lawn, haven't you?
3 times, mowed the lawn 3 times, got the pool partially cleaned out. The kids are driving me nuts because they want the pool open.
Yeah, that's impressive. My lawn, I noticed, looks like I should probably have mowed it once, but I have not gotten around quite to that because it's like parts of it look like it should have been mowed and other parts of it still look like they're recovering from winter. So I will probably pretend like I'm going to get around to that this weekend and then find a reason not to.
Yeah, the dad genes kicked in pretty hard this weekend. I mowed the lawn, had the straight lines, had to zip tie and do all that stuff. So it's all ready to go now. I got my lawn shoes on. I'm good to go.
The stained green white New Balance shoes, is that what you have?
They're Nikes, but they are white, stained green. They are. Believe it or not.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I threw out my lawn mowing shoes last year, so I don't even know what I'm gonna do. I might need to be in the market for a used pair of white tennis shoes just for that. So anyway, Chris, I'm excited. We're doing a podcast that's a little bit different than we've done in the past. One, because it is a longtime friend of yours. 2, it's a little bit of a crossover with my other podcast. That's Bitter Units for those that want to check that out. Check us out on the web at bitterunits.com. We are another Tailgate Society podcast.
Suck it, Aaron. I didn't send you a sample.
Shameless plug.
I didn't send Aaron a sample, so suck it.
Yeah, I saw that Aaron was looking for that. So he whines that I don't send him beer either. So he can deal. I don't think he sends me anything. So yeah, Aaron, suck it. But anyway, with all that said, Chris, I will go ahead and let you introduce our guest this evening.
Yeah, well, it is my pleasure to introduce one of my very dear oldest friends, Rob Taylor. Rob Taylor and I go back. Let me do the math here. Probably 86 sophomores in high school. We got stuck in a government class, and then also got stuck in study hall together. Rob is now killing it with a new distillery, Revelton Spirits, down in Osceola, Iowa. Rob, welcome to Old Man Strength. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
So, Rob, he gave you a very, very brief introduction that I feel like was sorely lacking. I didn't hear any praise. I didn't hear any explanation of what you have done, what brought you to this point. So I'm going to go ahead and give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about basically anything you want to talk about from after 1986 on.
Okay, well, first of all, Chris and I pinky promised way back in high school that we wouldn't reveal our deepest, darkest secrets about one another. So,
Dodge a bullet on this podcast.
no, I mean, Chris and I have known each other since sophomore year of high school, where he and I used to banter back and forth and have fun, just like all high schoolers hopefully had. And he's one of my deepest friends that I've known for years and years. Matter of fact, Chris and I kind of went off in life and went different directions after high school and college, and reconnected a few years ago through both hope and some tragedy. And I am so glad to have him back in my life again. And so, gosh, where do I start? I've lived many lives since 1986. Everything from a farmer and a diesel mechanic to a state congressman to a college professor, and now the owner, president, and primary distiller for Revelton Distilling Company in Osceola. So, gosh, just pick one of those, and we can go from there.
Well, shoot, I was going to say anything from farming to diesel mechanic to being part of the state legislature, all of those, well, and college professor, all of those would make me go very quickly into booze. So I think that's probably a more linear path than maybe even you would recognize. But man, that is quite a diverse array of lives, I guess, as you put it. You've lived multiple lives.
Yeah, I always say this: if you need a poster child, the politics will drive you to drink, and I'm definitely your guy.
Well, I will say about Rob, what I admire about Rob and his story is that we were two kids that grew up on the south side of Des Moines, and probably the only thing we had to rub together were dreams.
Yes, that's true. That's
right.
True, brother.
So the fact that he has evolved from maybe one profession or two professions that people strive to be and are happy to be, and that's perfectly fine. He's moved up, and that's almost the epitome of the American dream, right? Of working your way up and taking chances in life, and not being afraid to try new things and seeing where it goes. So that's kind of what I wanted to come on and have Rob talk about is just how you evolved from that, right? Like when you started right out of high school, you were working on your family farm, I think, right? And
yep, that's correct.
College, right?
Yeah, and my dad was the dean of the diesel and ag department at Des Moines Area Community College, and was a diesel mechanic himself. So we had a house on the south side of Des Moines where I went to school from elementary all the way through high school. But we always had our family farm just south of Osceola. So it didn't seem as special as it was then as it is now, if that makes sense. And the fact that I was just really this.
You were just living your life, right?
Yeah,
and back at it now, it's
having had one foot in Des Moines my whole life as a city kid, and the other foot in Osceola in New Virginia as a farm kid. It made me a very well-rounded individual about so many different things, life and death. I mean, I learned about life and death on the family farm. We had pureblood Limousin cattle. So if I wasn't in town in school, we were pulling calves and calving usually in February or March, and you learn a lot on the farm about how cruel and also how beautiful life can be. And I always remembered that when I came back into the city, because I think that's something that as a city kid and being around a lot of other city kids, they didn't really realize how wonderful life could be and how cruel it could be, both at the same time. So I carried that on in my life the technician world, and most importantly, where I got to practice it the most was in the legislature, where I represented West Des Moines, Waukee, and Clive, the Dallas County portion, which was the fastest growing urban district in the state. But in 2017, I think it was, I restored my sons and I restored my first Alice Chalmers WD tractor that was still on the farm. We did that in 15 days so that I could drive it to the Capitol from my house in West Des Moines to prove, with the suit and tie on, by the way, to prove that that there are urban legislators out there that do understand the country life and have lived the country life. So there's always this battle in the legislature, and it's going on up there right now between urban sprawl and rural divide, and there's just a select few of us that have lived both of those lives that kind of become a bridge builder between those two to try and get things done.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because I think for the 3 listeners that aren't in Iowa for our podcast, I think people don't necessarily understand, like you said, the urban sprawl, how quickly Polk County has grown over the last 20 years to the point that, my folks live in Polk County and they're retired. My dad did a lot of jobs. He started out as a vocational ag teacher up in the Star Mountain district up Strawberry Point.
Sure.
But he had spent some of his early life in the Ankeny area and in central Iowa. My sister was born in Des Moines, and I grew up in eastern Iowa in a rural community. But all my nieces and nephews that are growing up in the Ankeny area, even not Des Moines proper, and it's still very much, I wouldn't call it urban, but it's definitely suburban, and it's definitely lost a lot of that kind of rural root that I think people, I worked on a dairy farm as a kid, right? But, now my nieces and nephews are working at Chick-fil-A, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not, it's just a different exposure to like you said, to life, to death, to hard work, to, all of those things that's just a little bit different. So I could see why people wouldn't necessarily get, I represent, especially the area that you were representing, where there's probably a little bit more affluence and a little bit more, that people don't, wouldn't realize that not everyone in that area is out of touch with what the small farmer is going through.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is when the crisis of 2008 came, the crash. The interesting thing about the area that I represented was there was a lot of people that looked incredibly wealthy on the surface that had no food on their table. They didn't have a job. The food pantries here in I was on the Dallas County side. Rather than on the Polk County side. On the Dallas County side, they tended to ignore the problem and the issue of homelessness and hunger, and quite frankly, referred most of those people and families to Polk County for services because they didn't have an infrastructure in the Dallas County side to be able to support these quote affluent families that they just had no cash reserves. Well, man, if you grew up on a dairy farm and I grew up on a farm, cash reserves damned important. And if you don't have it as a farmer, you're just one season away from going out of business. So it was a real wake up call here. And, I've been blessed just like Chris to be taught a lot of different things and how to manage my money, even when you had none. When you start packing a little bit of money away, even if it's $10 a week, at the end of 1 year, if you don't touch that, it's pretty amazing how that little fund can compound itself if you leave it alone. So I don't know. I'm to the point where nobody would hire me, so I thought I'd just start my own distillery. Because I'm too independent.
Well, there's something to be said about that. I know that my dad had moved us to a farm when I was in fifth grade. We had moved down to Milo, outside of Milo and outside of Iowa. And kind of the same thing. I started off as a city kid, lived there for 3 or 4 years, worked on the farm. I mean, I was there when we didn't have indoor plumbing. I mean, we had, we dug a ditch and we ran plumbing. And so it was pretty prehistoric to me back then, and we were working with pigs and doing livestock and things like that. And same thing that you had talked about. We ended up moving because of cash reserves and whatever. And we had a fire, burn the house down when I was like in second grade. I remember coming home. We were coming home from a Christmas celebration in Des Moines, and we came around the corner and our house was burned down. Dad didn't have money in savings. He didn't have, and his life was up and down, right? We moved back to Des Moines. He did odd jobs. He did this, he did that. He ended up starting his own business in 1992, ran a successful used computer business, taught me everything I know about IT work and learned there. And at the height of 95, we had 2 stores and he, had bought a big house and then again, that ebb and flow of back down and so on. So I've learned a lot of lessons about that as well.
I met your dad a few times several years ago. And I mean, what an awesome guy. And the thing I remember about your dad is, and I think this is the key to just about anybody's success in this world today, is being a glass half full person and being positive, regardless of what happens to you in life. I mean, you don't know what good and happy is until you've experienced sadness and I call it withoutness. You don't realize how lucky you are when everything is taken away from you and you work towards gaining it back, if you will. And I mean, that's the ebb and flow of life.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I harped on quite a bit over this last year during COVID. It was heartbreaking for me to see small businesses hurt so badly by having to shut down and whatever. Now, I understand why they had to do that. I'm not politicizing that at all. I'm saying, but it was hard to see those businesses shut down and not know what they were going to do. And I can remember my dad sitting there worried sick, not because he wasn't going to make it or whatever, but he had 2 or 3 employees. He couldn't pay those employees. And that was his responsibility. And he took that personally, that he could make sure that those 3 families weren't being taken care of. So same deal.
I practice the same philosophy that I bet your dad did, is that you always pay yourself last. There's so many people that are counting on you as a small
unless
business
your son's
owner.
working for you, Rob.
That's true.
I got paid last too. I just so you know, I can wait for a paycheck too.
Fine, you were next to last.
But I was gonna say I thought that's why I had kids. Am I not gonna be able to do that? I thought that was the whole point.
Yeah. Well, we have remote controls now, so you don't have to worry about. Like when I was a little kid, one of my grandfathers was a TV repairman, and I was the human remote control for my dad and grandparents. So,
absolutely. Get up and change it to channel 4. Yeah, absolutely.
That's right.
Yeah,
you were saying that you yourself are paid last. My dad had a saying. He always would say, as a business owner, if I ran a restaurant, I wouldn't be willing to serve you something I wouldn't eat myself.
Exactly.
That was how he ran his business.
Exactly. And quite frankly, that's how we run our distillery as well. I mean, part of what I've done now over the last year and 3 months, I mean, everything that we did down at Revelton, in essence, it was a group of 6 of us and a couple of outstanding contractors that we took full advantage of when COVID hit. We were building. We did it safely. There was only 6 or 8 of us that always worked next to each other every day. And we put in 100-hour weeks in the middle of COVID, when I was watching on the news, everybody having a 1.5 year vacation at home with their families. And we chose, I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It works for every family, but we chose to work when no one else was working. And it's so far it's worked out. But that said, it's, my employees are my family, and I do my damnedest to try and take care of all of them and ensure that that Revelton Distilling Company will be there for years to come for them and their families and their neighbors and our community in Osceola to enjoy. So that takes a lot of patience and what's the word I'm looking for? Forthrightness to make sure that you put those things in place and don't waver. So, gosh, it's just been one heck of a ride, and I'm just damned happy to be alive.
So let's go ahead and get into the distillery a little bit.
Yeah.
How long have you guys been open?
We've been open since the third week in December of 2020.
Okay, so I am a brewer by trade.
Yes. Yep.
And so I know a little bit about what goes into that, but aside from having one more of a step in the process, you really have two more steps in the process. So not only are you now distilling beer, essentially.
Exactly. My first stage is to make beer wort,
yep.
and then process it through our column still, our continuous flow still, and in essence, take that 6 to 8% alcohol and turn it into 60 to 70% whiskey.
And so now the other thing, though, is that you have added to there. So not only is it running it through that column still, is aging.
That's correct.
Right? And
yep.
That scares the crap out of me. The idea that you have these products that you want to make that you're betting your business on a product that you're not going to be able to sell right out of the gate.
That's right.
I don't remember exactly it's like 2 years and a day or something like that.
2 years and a day to call yourself straight bourbon. Yes.
Yeah.
It
right.
has to be
yeah. In like Scotland, it's like 3 years and a day for whiskey, like different rules, but it's straight bourbon is 2 years and a day, right?
Yep. So, but beyond that, I mean, just like any other business, even when you were growing up on the dairy farm, I bet your dad and your mom probably also had corn and beans, and you probably grew hay, not only to feed your livestock, but also to sell as an ancillary, cash flow. I'm guessing. Am I right?
Yeah. So
we do the same thing at the distillery. I mean, our premier products will be our bourbon and our rye, but between now and 2 to 3 years from now, I have a phenomenal American style gin that we make right there on site. A very popular product is rapidly becoming our number one seller of mulberry gin. That doesn't taste like gin at all, but we make mulberry mules with it, mulberry mojitos, all kinds of really cool things. I have a premium whiskey that I partnered with a friend of mine in Indiana until I get my reserves built up, that I use a 3-year whiskey in our honey whiskey. And then I use honey out of our other company, the Iowa Honey Company, to make one of the finest honey whiskeys you'll ever taste. And then we make a whiskey and cream liqueur. We call it a bourbon cream that people are just going gaga over. So there's 6 products that we have on the shelf right now. And I just introduced a 7th we got done today that's called Revelton Shine. So it's a white unaged whiskey. So there's 7 products that we have out there right now that people are really, really embracing quickly to help us with our cash flow and get from short-term gains to long-term gains when we release our rye in 2 years and our bourbon in 3.
Well, and not to stereotype anyone, but the family that I've had in southern Iowa, that White Lightning, they're very much a fan of unaged White Lightning Shine style whiskey. So I would imagine that one has probably been had a few people a little excited about that one too.
They have been very excited about it, and we won't be the typical what you would call moonshine. This is smooth and doesn't burn, and makes some phenomenal cocktails that, depending on your cocktail, you wouldn't even know it wasn't just aged whiskey. It's got that good of a flavor. So
Sure.
I'm really excited about it. But
Costing me more money. That's all that's doing.
that's right. It is.
It's just
That's
costing
true.
me more money.
That's
went
true,
through,
man.
I went through almost an entire bottle of the honey whiskey when I was on my golf trip this weekend. So
Yeah, I keep getting phone calls that people tell me my bottle's defective because every damn time they pick it up, it's empty.
So I will tell you a testament. I couldn't make it down to your place, so I stopped at the local Hy-Vee.
Yeah.
And I asked the guy, because I had to buy some samples for Tim. And I asked the guy if he had any of the small sample bottles, and he did. And he mentioned to me, just without prompting, how much it was selling off the charts there at that Hy-Vee.
That's awesome. I got to stop by and give him a 20.
Right?
But look, here's the thing. This is the great thing about people in Iowa and also in Minnesota. I've been lucky enough to travel all over the world through my life. And I mean, I've been in so many places, and you can always spot an Iowan no matter where you go. I always say there's only 3.1 million of us, but you can find us everywhere, and you know who we are because we always have a smile on our face and we're always talking. But the reality of that situation is whether it be our distillery or honey company or when I was a service manager years ago at an automotive dealership, the thing is the quality of your product is only as good as the raw materials you use going in it, and the forthrightness and stringent code that you have with that product. And with that, you hope that you'll end up with a great product. And the great thing about Iowans is we're straightforward people and we're honest. We'll tell you how we feel. And the great thing about, and what I'm so proud about, on at least on the distillery front, is we've had so much positive reviews from everyone about how much they love our product. And quite frankly, the truth of the matter is nobody. We're only 18 weeks old right now, and nobody really even knows what Revelton means. They don't really know who the owners are. We're just at the point of just starting to tell our story, and our products are already rolling off the shelf. So for me, that makes me very, very proud, honored, and humbled to know that it's been embraced this quickly.
Well, let's talk about that. The Revelton has a reason for the name, and you have some things to go along with that. Why don't you tell a little bit about why you came up with that name and what some of those things on the bottle mean? Yeah. So Revelton in and of itself was a name that we came up with out of necessity. We're looking for a name at the very beginning of a 10-year journey to my wife and I deciding that we're going to start a distillery 10 years ago. And about 3 years ago, it really started to come to fruition of, if we're going to do this, we need to do it now. So the long and short of it, one of the very first things that you have to do is try and figure out a name that you can trademark. So, I mean, literally a 2-month a workshop between my wife and I almost every night of coming up with names that described us. And the word that we came up with that described my wife Christy and I, which also is another Lincoln graduate that graduated with us in 1989. Chris, I've known her since middle school.
Yeah, I know. Gosh, man, you can tell me stories then. But the word that we both came up with that we thought described both of us was the word revel, R-E-V-E-L, which means to dance and celebrate loudly. But that in and of itself just seemed short. If you'd name it Revel Distillery, it just didn't seem right. So knowing that we were going to locate in Osceola, we thought about the name of Revel Town. It'd be a dance and celebrate town. Well, we're at dinner one night with my youngest son, teenager, who has his face stuffed full of food. And we're talking about this name. And with his face stuffed full of food, he says, I don't like the word Reveltown. But what it came out as was Revelton. And the long and short of it was, we didn't think it meant anything, but we loved the sound of Revelton rye. And we also knew that we'd make a root beer. So I loved the name of Revelton root beer. So we did a trademark search. It was not taken. So we trademarked it. After that trademark, this is where it gets really weird. About a month into getting the trademark, I sent it out on social media to some of my friends that said that we had come up with our name of Revelton. And one of my my very, very dear friends who worked on the campaign trail with me, her name's Flora Schmidt. She texts me within seconds of us releasing the name, and she's like, "That name fits you guys so well." And I'm like, "Well, what the hell? What okay, what the hell? I'm like, what do you say? Thanks." So I did, and I said, "What do you mean?" And she's one of those that she does proper name searches on the web. Mm-hmm. And when she researched the name Revelton, because nobody knew what it meant, she came back to me and she said, "Well, don't you know Revelton in Old Irish, and I'm half Irish, means maker of spirits?" And I'm like, "You've got to be kidding me! That's nuts!
That is serendipitous."
Right. Well, but then it even gets even weirder. In Gaelic, so really old Irish, it actually means diplomat. So having had many of the jobs that I've had in my life, one of which being serving as that, one of the drinks that we have down at Revelton now we call is meant to be, because we knew the name was meant to be.
Yeah, that's pretty fantastic. That's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
How often does your son hold that over your head?
Well, right now I pay him $20 a week for rights to the name, but I think that's going to go up pretty damn quick. So,
and see, now if you were your dad or my dad, you would do that and then turn around and hand him a bill for all the food that he ate and
right.
Everything else. That would be
I don't have to do that. It's just a gentle reminder at this point of, well, if you want to pay for the car insurance and the gas that goes in it and college.
Right.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So anyway.
As my dad used to say, I once told him, I said, "Hey, you owe me $5." And he's like, "Listen, all you'll ever be able to do is get even with me."
Right. Right. I had a bet with my dad. We used to bet all the time, just $5 and $10. And then of course you get in that high school cocky, I know everything, part of life as teenagers. And I bet my dad $1 million. My sophomore year of high school, about the time I met you, Chris, and we shook on it, and I lost that bet, and I owed him $1 million until my freshman year of college, when I knew for a fact what he was telling me was wrong, and I did my research before I made the bet, and I got it back, so we're broke even.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's great. Well, I will tell you, I think one of the testaments to your success is Christy.
Yeah. Oh, amen.
I can't imagine. I mean, I know anytime I go to my wife and give her some crazy idea, she is always supportive, and will give me the other side and say, "Now let's listen to this," or whatever.
Wait, have you met Christy?
Yeah, no, I get you. But my point is I'm sure at some point that's got to be a huge leap for her. Because of what she does, and you guys have a good job and a good living and so on.
Yeah,
you're willing to say let's throw caution to the wind here, and she's got that much faith in you and your passion. That's a testament to your guys' relationship and marriage, and to the woman that she is.
Oh, absolutely. And she we walked side by side through this whole process, and getting it launched, and beyond that, I mean, she's, as you've been down there a couple times, Chris, she's there on weekends bartending and helping train our new bartending staff upstairs in the tasting room when I'm downstairs, and making stuff and working with our assistant distillers and our staff downstairs. So we divide and conquer. And I just had one of our employees recently from the tasting room side last Saturday. It was kind of a crazy day. But she came up to Christy and I both when we were upstairs in the tasting room, and she gave us a hug, and she's like, "I love it when you're both down here, because it just is so awesome." And I thought, okay, that's awesome. We're doing some things right then. Not that it's not crazy when it's just me, but we've truly built a family down there that is like, okay, on Saturdays, mom and dad are both here, and it just feels good. So it's something I can't explain. It's just something you have to feel.
I mean, I think that's just an awesome story. I mean, like the whole idea, like I had mentioned before, that opening a distillery seems like a scary proposition, and you. Oh wait!
Don't get me wrong. Can we cuss on this podcast?
Yeah. By all means.
Okay, good. It's scary.
We're from the South Side. We're from the South Side.
Okay, man. All right.
Right.
No, it's scary as shit.
Well, I mean, and running for public office is scary as shit, right? Like they're.
Yeah, that running a distillery seems like a piece of cake compared to being in politics.
But running for public office, what's the worst that can happen? I mean, we're in the United States. What's the worst that can happen? You lose.
Yeah.
And you know, when I taught a couple classes a few years ago, and I don't teach anymore just because I don't have time and I miss it. But you know, the thing is if you, no matter what you do, the worst that can happen is you fail. And the cool thing about, and this is one of the things that I don't think our society embraces that much. We're always pushed to win. And the thing is, if you always win and you never take risks, the first time that you lose or you fail, people just crumble.
Yes.
And I used to tell my students this, and I've even told my staff this, you know, you're going to screw up sometimes. And the cool thing about screwing up is we can sit down and we can talk about what happened, why it happened, so that you can learn from it and know how to overcome adversity. And, you know, if I could leave anybody with anything tonight, if they would just hear me on this, don't be afraid anymore. Don't be afraid to go out, step out on a limb and try something, because the worst that could happen is you fail. And then you either try it again and do it better the next time, or you decide it's not for you and you go and find something else. I mean, part of the reason why I've had so many careers that I've had over the last 35 years is because I've used each one of those as stepping stones to do something vastly different in my life. And not all people are wired that way, but I like doing different things for a period of times so that I can learn from it.
Rob, you're right in the wheelhouse of what I preach all the time to my kids and to anybody that'll listen. I will
this podcast, Chris is
on this podcast. In 2017, when they gave me the news that I had cancer, and I will vividly remember this to the day I die. Caitlin came upstairs. She was crying and she was upset. And I asked her what was wrong. She said, "It's not fair. Why did it happen to you?" And whatever. And I was like, "Oh, well, wait, we ain't playing this bullshit."
Right.
We're not feeling sorry for ourselves. We're not laying down and taking a beating. We're not going to get the shit kicked out of us. We're going to move forward. We don't quit around here.
Right.
Don't worry about failure. If I was worried about failure, listen, I changed my life. 2008, I made the decision that my life was not where I wanted it to be. Health-wise, where I was at with my career, and so on. And I made hard choices.
Yeah.
I remember people going, "Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that?" Well, what's the alternative? I'm going to be miserable the rest of my entire life when I could take a shot here, and what's the worst that could happen? I'll end up right where I'm at. But at least I took a shot.
Yeah. I mean, more than anything, just don't give up.
Right.
Just don't give up.
And look where my life is now. I have an amazing wife that I say to this day, I never in my life would ever think that a woman that amazing and smart and beautiful would ever look at me and fall in love with me.
I'll be honest with you. I thought the same thing when I met her the first time, but she is awesome.
I was going to say, I still think there has to be something wrong with her, Chris.
I mean, we can bring her down here. You can ask her what's wrong with her.
I mean, does she wear glasses?
she wears contacts. Okay, we're moving on. Remember, we're moving on. We're not talking about that shit.
Yeah.
No, man. Hey, I'm telling you the same thing. I mean,
failure to fair, and I won't get into too much details because I can't get into too many details right now. But I made a decision 2 weeks ago to try something that is completely out of my wheelhouse. That if it comes through, great. It's going to fulfill a passion that I've had for 4 years. If not, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to do the same thing that I'm doing now.
Right.
Just like this podcast. I've never done a podcast in my life. Do I have anything that anybody's going to want to hear me say? Probably not.
Oh, I disagree with that.
But I think, if there's few people that get something out of it,
yeah,
if anything has gotten me closer to some of my family, and that's okay for me, right?
Yeah.
But 100% what you said, you cannot be afraid to try things. You can't live in fear.
Now, on the other end of this, I have a good friend of mine that doesn't want me to mention his name, but he's significantly older than me and has been a very good friend and mentor that I met clear back, not a legislator, but when I first ran for public office. And very similar to me in an older way, he's done a lot of different things, from being a physician to owning a couple of companies, and very successfully, and a guy that I think a lot of. And when Christy and I thought we were going to go down this adventure of Revelton, he looked at our business plan at my request. We had lunch, and he looked up and he smiled and he said, "Here's the thing, guys." He actually called us kids because he's that old. He said, "Here's the thing, kids." He said, "So many people fear failure," and he says this with a smile, but I know it to be true. He said, don't fear failure, because failure is very short. It's very temporary. It can be very painful at the time that it happens, but after it happens, it's over and you move on with life. He said, what people don't think about is success. He said, fear success, because the more successful you become, the more driven you become, the more things you think you need to do. And before you know it, it becomes an obsession. And then you start to forget about your friends and your family and all the other things that made you who you are. So he points his finger at Christy and I both, and he said, I don't think you guys are going to fail, but I'm concerned that because this, I think, is going to be so successful, that you make sure that you make time for each other and make time for your family, and don't let it become an obsession. And I thought that was outstanding advice.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I kind of wanted to touch on, right? Like, so Christy's along for the ride with you, which is awesome. But when I think about these things and the path that I took in my life, it's one thing to say, hey, what's the worst that can happen if I run for public office and I lose?
Right.
But I have a lot of loved ones that I'm bringing along for the ride.
Yeah.
Whether they want to or not in some ways, right? And so to me, that's where maybe the risk for me lies in a bigger thing. Is I'm not afraid of failing, but I'm afraid of the fact that I'm putting myself out there, which if, I were a single guy, whatever, that's fine.
Yeah.
But bringing everyone else that comes along for the ride, whether they like it or not, that to me is also maybe probably where a lot of my risk lies, or my fear of that is not that I'm failing for myself, but now I am am I too focused on my goals and not our goals collectively, and B, am I exposing them to things that they're not, they're signing up for because they love me, not because they're signing up for because it's not their dream, it's my dream type of thing, right?
Yeah, well, the cool thing about the relationship that Christy and I have is that we do things together. I mean, I support her professionally, and we do a lot of things for her career together. And before the distillery, she did a lot of things for me for my career, and we did them together. And when we chose to run for public office, and notice I said we did it together. Now, the hardest thing about after you win in public office, whether it be me or whether it be you or your significant other, is the other office holder is always. So me as the state representative, I was always the spokesperson. I was always the one that was interviewed and so on and so forth. And the hardest thing for the spouse on that other end of it is not saying what you think. And that's difficult because Chris will know this. My wife was the debate president in 1989, and I was in debate as well. We're both very outspoken people. And for you put the camera on either one of us, we might have very differing opinions about different issues.
Sure.
And the media sometimes can do their very best to try and divide you based upon talking to both of you as to what you may think. So we had to learn to evolve in our relationship about who's the elected official and who is not, and making sure that we don't put one another in a bad position based upon what our political position may be. So actually, it helped Christy and I grow a lot as a couple going through that for 3 terms on respecting each other's viewpoints and knowing that we're not twins. We don't think alike, and it's that diversity of thought that helped us get closer as a couple in being able to agree to disagree. And I think that's something that we miss in society today, both as friends and as spouses. I mean, gosh, not to throw Chris under the bus, but I will for just a second. But in a good way.
Because I think I was going to throw you under the same bus.
Right. Chris and I are outstanding examples, I think, of 2 people that on a few issues, we have vastly different opinions, to the point where most people would just say, screw you, I'm not your friend anymore. But the thing is that's not true friendship. True friendship is being able to talk through issues and listen to one another about what's important and why, and learn from it. You can still agree to disagree, but true friendship means that you can have knockdown, drag out arguments, but still, at the end of the day, there is nothing that will get in the way of our friendship. And I think it's something that we're very, very much missing in today's society.
I think
we had a discussion on a podcast before about being able to work with people and still maintain friendships with people that were on the other side of the aisle.
Yeah.
And I have always said that I will always fight passionately for what I believe in. And you may not necessarily have that same view. But man to man, if I picked up the phone or you picked up the phone and said, I need assistance for this,
dude,
or whatever,
I'd be there in a heartbeat.
There wouldn't be any question, right?
Right.
Because I know what kind of a person you are. You know what kind of a person I am. And sadly, we have a friend that I've just stopped talking to because every conversation I ended up having with him was political.
Yeah.
And that's not what it's about. I can have a political conversation with you and give you my views, and then 5 minutes later comment on a photo of yours and make a joke because we're friends.
Right.
And that stopped happening with that other friend, and I'm sad about that. Because I admire him and I admire what he's accomplished. But it just is what it is. But I agree 100%. It's lost in this country now. It's lost in this entire country.
Well, and I nothing against social media, but everything against social media. I mean, when you go onto Facebook and you're liking friends, I think a more appropriate term would be acquaintances, because that's where I think those 2 terms, people think they mean the same, but they're vastly different. I mean, I have a ton of acquaintances in my life, but I really only have a handful of true friends. And that's just really how life goes. The older you get, the fewer friends you have, just because of people dying or moving away. But I really, really think it's so essential for people to find people to make friends with that don't agree with them. Because I think at the end of the day, it brings in true friendships, and it makes both those people more well-rounded for them, their families, their colleagues in the future, to know that there's another opinion besides theirs that they may not agree with, but still they like this person and they want to be friends with them, and they respect them, and they'll listen to them even though they may not agree. And boy, if there was anything in life that taught me how to do that the best, it was really the legislature. I had a former governor that told me, before I walked in my first day, he says, the only piece of advice that I'm going to give you is listen more than you talk. And I tried to do that, both with my own party and with and the other party, just because I wanted to understand where they were coming from and why they were so passionate about a particular subject matter, whether it be good or bad or something I agreed with or I didn't. And
I think
go ahead.
I think it's easier to open your mind up to other people's points of view when you have such a good relationship with them, right? You and I might have a conversation, and because I know the kind of man you are and the integrity that you have and so on, I'll be more apt to listen to your point of view and try to see that and understand it than I would with somebody that talks about talking points and I don't have a relationship with.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for that. But the thing that I challenge everybody to is, when you go back to work tomorrow, or you go to the gym, or you go back to your own neighborhood. We all have neighbors that we've probably never talked to before. And why is that? Not varying reasons. So my challenge for everybody would be, go out and find that one person that you don't like or you've never talked to before. And I challenge you to strike up a relationship with them and listen more than you talk. And it will surprise the hell out of you what happens. I mean, for the love of Pete, if Thomas Jefferson and John Adams can be friends at right before they die, and the best of friends, that gives me hope in what a democracy really looks like, and a representative republic, and what we can do as Americans.
You look at Bill Clinton and George Bush.
Oh, George Bush, absolutely.
You know, you couldn't find two people more diametrically opposed to each other. And
right.
We're very close at the end when George Sr. died.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think, it's one thing to talk about these things from these broad, larger political, diametrically opposed people. I think on a more day-to-day basis. So we talk about it because social media has amplified these differences. But to me, this isn't anything that is new or different. In fact, Rob, I appreciate what you said about you and Christy not seeing eye to eye, because I get the sense that as much as you tried to make sure it was clear in your political life, but I get the sense that
you can say it. It's okay.
Well, your employees and your kids have probably seen you and your wife have healthy disagreements.
I would call them robust arguments.
Sure. Okay. So, but my point
hasn't met Christy yet.
Right.
Well,
right.
You mentioned you both guys, you both did debate, but I think my point is that I feel like even a generation ago, there was this kind of tacit idea that parents needed to be on the same page, or in small businesses that business partners needed to present the same face to employees.
Yeah.
And I would argue that is the same problem, just a microcosm of the larger problem that we have now.
Right. And I go,
we need to have healthy examples, I guess, of people disagreeing and still, not that you don't want your kids both raised with the same, ideals, or you want your employees to see the same kind of vision for your company, but I think there was almost an artificiality to the way parents were supposed to agree. Right. Or the way employers agreed.
Right. So one of the businesses that I sold before I started the distillery, I had a training and consulting business in automotive, ag, and over-the-road trucking companies, where I would go in and talk to service departments about what their issues or problems were. And the truth of the matter was, the very first place that I'd always go when I went into an auto repair shop or a ag shop is I'd always go back to the technicians, and I'd always find the technician's bay that was the furthest from the service manager's office, because he or she was put there for a reason, because nobody wanted to listen to him anymore. They were viewed as pissy or moany, and by the way, some of them were. But the reality of the situation is, whether it be in our marriage or in our relationships or in our friendships or in the professional world, surround yourself with people that don't agree with you and give them the opportunity to speak their minds. No matter how ridiculous it might sound, everybody has an idea that you can glean from. And the truth of the matter is the more ideas come at you that are diverse, the stronger your family is, the stronger your friendships are, and the stronger your business is. It's just a matter of whether or not, as a business owner or a CEO or the owner of a company, if you can have that type of relationship with all of your people. If you don't, then train your managers to listen to everybody, that there is no dumb idea, to give access to the decision makers from the people that are the workers to share ideas. That's what makes us stronger. And once communication shuts down and you don't share ideas anymore, marriages turn into divorces, businesses turn into bankruptcies, and nothing good comes from it. So I sound like I'm preaching. I'm sorry.
No, that's what this podcast does. We preach things, and then hopefully people listen and do what we tell them. That's the whole gist of this. But Rob, my dad was. We talk a lot about our dads, but my dad was kind of in the same way. He always used to say when we'd have conversations at the store, listen, let's have a debate and let's have conversations. I want to hear all your ideas. I want to hear everybody's opinion. But his only caveat is at that point, once everybody's decision was heard and and he came to a decision based off of those ideas. Yeah. He then expected every single person to work just as hard. Yeah. As if I took your idea. Yeah. And I've kind of lived with that a lot. And I didn't live a lot with that in my first marriage, and I have with my second. My wife and I can have conversations, and it could be something as simple as buying a dishwasher or doing this or doing that. We will have a conversation, and there will be times where I'll be like, "We're still discussing this? Yeah. Why are we still discussing this? And then she will come up and have another idea, and I'll be like, "Oh, didn't think of that." Right. Well, and look, men and women communicate very, very differently too. I mean, perfect example. You can put you, me, and Tim in the car for 7.5 hours, and we might drive all of that 7.5 hours and say all of 5 words to one another, or hey, we pull off to the next exit because I got to go, and everybody would be good with that. I know this because my wife has not only told me this, but several other women have told me this. You put 3 best friend women in the same car, driving the same distance, and nobody's talking that whole time in 7 hours, they all think that everybody's a bitch and everybody's mad at them. Everyone's mad at each other. What's going on? Yeah. Yeah. So just fundamentally, just the way we communicate differently. Now, this is God's little joke. Go on vacation with just you and your spouse, and you, the male, as a driver, what do we want to do? We just want to drive for 6 or 7 hours and enjoy the scenery, right? Mm-hmm. How many times did your significant other go, hey, are you okay? Are you mad at me? What should we talk about? And so just using this as an example, the same thing happens in the corporate world, in the political world, is that when you divide men and women, they communicate very differently. But when you put them together and they understand how each other's thinks and how they communicate, wonderful, beautiful things start to happen. So, I mean, I've been married to my wife for 27 years, and she knows that when we go on vacation, I'll drive for the first 4 hours, and then we'll switch, and then she'll drive. Because when I'm driving, I just want to look around and I don't want to talk. When she's driving, she wants to look around, put her makeup on, and talk. So, and I have to be okay with that. So, I'll tell you a funny story. We went to go see my wife's father in Harlan one time, and Stacy's mom passed away about 3 or 4 months before I met her. And we were sitting at Jean's table one day, and my wife loves to read newspaper articles out, right? Like she'll find a story and she'll read the entire article to me. And I just let her go because I that's fine. She read this article one time, and Jean goes, "You know what I miss about your mother? She
No.
She just liked to look at the pictures. That's all.
Oh my God.
I was like, that's the greatest burn ever. Not only did he honor your mom, but he made fun of you for reading the entire article. It was so great. But that like sums it up, right? Like he was like, can you just, get on with the story and give me the highlights? But same thing. Totally same thing.
Yep, it's pretty awesome. So
let me ask you this. Let's move back into what, and we'll go a little bit longer here, but you're in the legislature. You took a trip to Kentucky. Is that right? Is that what got you on this journey here? A tour of a bourbon place. So we talk about that story.
So I'm trying to think of my timeline. It's 2021. So it would be 2011. Yeah, July of 2011. My wife and I belong to the State Fair Foundation for the Iowa State Fair Board. And so every July, right before the Iowa State Fair, they have the Iowa Corn Dog Kickoff. And one of the live auctions in the Iowa Corn Dog Kickoff was this trip to a week trip to the heart of the Kentucky Bourbon Trail in a little town called Bardstown, Kentucky, where they have the annual Kentucky Bourbon Festival. And so it's a week-long celebration that at the end of the week on a Saturday, they give 400 tickets worldwide for you to attend their gala. And inside that gala, it's a great big huge warehouse that they've got all of the major distilleries that have built these beautiful bars. And you go in your black tie and formal gown with a gunny sack, going around to each one of the bars. So like Maker's Mark and Woodford Reserve and Wild Turkey and you name it, they were there. And you sample their products. And at the end of that sample, you get to keep the glassware, which I thought was cool as hell. And I can't even tell you how much glassware I have here after 10 years. But
yeah, you know what? Brewing industry, same way. I'm looking over right now at like 4 shelves, and I gave away probably 6 shelves.
Oh yeah. If people came down to my basement right now, they would go, "What the hell? You have a problem?" Yes, I do. I have such a problem. I built a distillery. But so the long and short of it is that we absolutely fell in love with the Bourbon Festival. The people of Bardstown got to meet Jimmy Russell and his wife, as well as his son Eddie Russell, the master distillers from Wild Turkey. We got to meet Jim Rutledge, who was the master distiller at the time for Four Roses. Mm-hmm. And then in Bardstown, there's a beautiful distillery that most Iowans don't know yet because we don't carry their product unless you special order it. Drew and Janelle Colsfeen and their family own a distillery in Bardstown called Willits. And the long and short of it, over the next 2 or 3 years, we built friendships with all of these people. And by year 4 of us traveling up, which is when I really was in the heart of the legislature, Jimmy Russell from Wild Turkey and Jim Rutledge from Four Roses and my wife and I and their spouses went to dinner. And Jimmy Russell looks over at my wife and I and affectionately called us Iowa. So he leans back in his chair and he folds his arms back and he says, "Iowa, what I don't understand is why the hell you all don't make whiskey in Iowa. You're the corn capital of the world. And by the way, do you know where Wild Turkey gets most of their corn from?" And then he points over at Jim Rutledge at Four Roses, and you know where he gets most of his corn from? And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, a little company called Kent Feeds in Iowa."
Yep.
And and again, being a rural kid, but a city guy too, I didn't know that, and I was blown away by it. And so on our way home, because my wife and I always drove down and back for obvious reasons, because you can't put that much alcohol on a plane legally. So on our way back that year, Christy and I started talking and dreaming a little bit. And she's like, "Why the hell don't we have more distilleries in Iowa?" And by the next year, it was, "Why the hell don't we build a distillery in Iowa?" And that was at about year 5 of going down. And then by year 10, we were up and going. So great thing is all of those folks had done what we hadn't done before, and they'd done it the Kentucky way. So we had a lot of experience and background in helping not only build our distillery, but build it right, have a good marketing plan, a good product. And quite frankly, I've just brought a little bit of Kentucky back to Iowa. Our stills are made by Vendome Copper and Brass Works, which is a former diesel mechanic. I say it's the Snap-on tools of still making, the creme de la creme. My fermenting tanks were built in Bardstown, Kentucky, by the same guy that builds them for Sazerac and Diageo. And my consultant, well, I have two of them actually now. Randy Allender, who worked for Jim Beam for 25 years, lives in Bardstown, Kentucky. And he's back about 4 times a year to help me out back here in Iowa. And, I've just taken a lot of pointers from the bourbon capital of the world so that we can just bring a little bit of that back to Iowa and do it right.
Yeah, no, it's something that I've always wondered too, of why I know the reason. So, Iowa has certainly took a while to get past some of the prohibition era.
Yeah, and we still got a long ways to go.
Right?
But
Minnesota suffers from a lot of that too, right?
Yeah.
And so there was probably a little bit more freedom for all of that. Iowa's very proud of feeding the world with all of their corn and not realizing that maybe they could be using something like that, like you said, from Kent Feeds.
The irony, though, was when the pandemic hit, all of us, including me, who was mid-build in a distillery, everybody was hit up with, can you make hand sanitizer? Can you make hand sanitizer? Can you make hand sanitizer? And I got the phone call from a couple of elected officials about it. And I said, look, my distillery is not even done yet. But here's the thing. We've got ethanol plants all over Iowa and Minnesota, by the way, that are making huge sums of ethanol that it wouldn't take much at all to convert them to hand sanitizer. So I called Senator Ernst herself and said, hey, you and Senator Grassley need to talk about this. And within about 2 weeks, they had made a bill to allow ethanol plants to make hand sanitizers. Now, take that one step further. My friends at Willett in Bardstown, Kentucky, in the 1970s, that particular facility actually was one of the largest ethanol, or what at the time was called gasohol, producers in the middle states. And then petroleum prices went way down, and they couldn't make it. So they actually went bankrupt as an ethanol facility, but the family bought it back and restructured it to make whiskey and bourbon. And there's no reason at all why the state of Iowa couldn't do the same doggone thing. And we could be the bourbon capital of the world if in the next 50 years, if we'd focus on it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there's been a great craft beer boom in Iowa.
Yeah.
Iowa has had they want to have good wine. It's not a good wine growing region by any means, but you have this very clear, very abundant crop that can make some fantastic spirits.
Right.
Jump all over that. Capitalize on that by all
Amen.
means.
And so the long and short of why we decided to do a distillery too was a lot of what we've been talking about earlier, about people not getting along, and we never even got into competitors. There's so many industries, especially in the automotive world where I came from, fierce competitors, and and again in politics, fierce competitors. Democrats shouldn't talk to Republicans. Republicans shouldn't talk. Bullshit. Part of the reason why I loved the spirit, pardon the pun, of the distillery world was in Kentucky and Tennessee. You have all of these distilleries that are fierce competitors, but they're a band of brothers, that if there's something that happens in their industry, they support one another. I wanted to do that and bring that to Iowa. There's really only about 12 distilleries in Iowa right now that have active licenses. And while I would consider all of us fierce competitors, we all know each other. We all try and support each other. We all congratulate each other. I mean, I'm 35 miles south of Kyle Doyle and Iowa Distilling Company. And that guy and I are texting nearly daily and congratulating each other on some accomplishments that he's made and that he's recognized with me. And we have lunch once in a while, and, we try and support each other. So I not only want to build a distillery in Iowa, but I want to build an infrastructure of community and tourism that people can travel from and experience.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. We say a lot in craft brewing that a rising tide lifts all ships.
Absolutely.
And I think as craft brewing has exploded as it has over the last 15 years, it's gotten a little bit more competitive, but there's still a lot of that camaraderie. Last weekend I was out at a bar with a different brewer. Literally tomorrow, I'm going to go brew a beer at another brewery with a friend of mine. Not even a collaboration, just literally, hey, hanging out.
Yeah.
We're always and we're doing so with ingredients borrowed from a different brewery, and we're always bouncing those things off of each other. And I think in the distilling world, particularly in a state like Iowa where it's still young, not, I don't want to say immature, but it's an
infant stage.
Yeah. Right. And so you definitely have an opportunity to do exactly that. Like to take the industry and this potential and develop it all together. Like, I don't know if if there is already, or there could be a distillers guild or association or something like that in Iowa. I think, those types of things. Okay. Well, wonderful. Yeah. Right.
But, you and I are in one of the oldest professions in the world, between brewery and distillery and winery. So,
yes. And that's called prostitution.
Yeah, no, I wasn't going to bring that one. That's the oldest one.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, that only happens in Vegas. But
I was going to say, I still feel like I've sold myself against maybe some of my better judgment for some of the products that we've had to make, but that's entirely different.
And interestingly enough, there wasn't everybody in my community, and quite frankly, even in my own family, that embraced the concept of a distillery.
Sure.
This will come out in more of our story down the road, but my Taylor family actually came from the hills of Kentucky, and Bracken County, Kentucky specifically, as moonshiners. And my grandfather moved here during the Great Depression because he was a prohibitionist, wanted to get away from the family business, and moved to Iowa to become a farmer and raised his family in New Virginia. So my dad is the youngest of four of those. And my oldest uncle thinks this is pretty cool. My youngest uncle absolutely adamantly opposed to me having a distillery. And I said, that's okay, because you know what? We make a Revelton root beer and that doesn't have any alcohol in it. And then he thought it was pretty cool. And by the way, so did the religious community in Osceola once they realized that we're not just making hooch to get people drunk. We end up becoming the epicenter and being family friendly, to be able to bring families in and mom have a cocktail and, her kids have a couple Revelton root beers. So it's rapidly become a really popular place to sit down, relax, and unwind, whether you have kids or not, and whether you like drinking or not. We've got something for everybody. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. The word pub literally is short for public house. Right?
Absolutely.
And I think people forget that. There's this big debate in the craft brewing community of kids in a tap room or not, or those types of things. Like, no, think of this as a public house. This is a place where all can get together and have that sense of community.
Well, and not to go too far, but why not? What the hell? I think as Americans, I think we're really, what's the most polite word to put it? We're
polite on this podcast.
We're schizophrenic. So we're schizophrenic with alcohol, for example. You go to Europe, and their kids will have a glass of wine or a glass of beer at 10, 11, 12 years old. And when you look at alcoholism in Europe, it's almost unheard of, because alcohol isn't this big taboo thing. And not that I'm comparing Americans to Europe, but I'm saying culturally, there's not the taboo that comes around it.
If you make something verboten, then people are going to gravitate towards it.
Right. And the same thing with nudity. You go all over France, and there's people that, that bathe topless all over France, and they don't think anything of it. They can always tell the Americans, because the Americans are the ones that are gawking on the beaches. But again,
yeah, by the way, Chris, that is not an invitation to get naked.
Right.
I just want to make sure that that's understood.
Oh, shit, man.
But and this is legal.
This weekend.
This is legal, but we've raised 4 kids. 3 of my 4 kids are adults now, 2 girls and 2 boys. But growing up, we took the European approach when it came to alcohol. That if we sat down for dinner, if the kids wanted a glass of wine or they wanted a small glass of beer with their dinner, we would allow it, and we didn't use the F word. We didn't forbid it. And both my girls went off to undergraduate and graduate school, and they didn't party it up like a lot of other kids did, because it wasn't any big deal. And
my dad let me have wine, and I hated it. And it wasn't until I got to be in my mid-20s before I realized I didn't hate wine. My dad just had terrible taste in wine.
Sure. Now my wife doesn't like it when I bathe topless along our pool, but I don't know what to do with that.
I don't know why she wouldn't like that, Rob.
I know. I say
you're a handsome man.
That's right.
I don't know.
Well, Rob, I don't want to keep you too much longer. I did want to sneak in one more question, because I had the honey whiskey. I'm drinking some of the honey vodka now, and I didn't realize that you also have a honey business as part of this, right?
I do. We started the Iowa Honey Company about 6 years ago, and it was when my kids were teenage and pre-teenage, and we started that company to teach our kids how to start a business, how to trademark, and more importantly, how to connect with agriculture. Because at the time I was so damn busy that we didn't do a lot in the country. And so my wife and I took a beekeeping class in Sheraton, Iowa on a Friday night. It was our Friday night date night for 6 weeks. And we took our boys with us, and we fell in love with it. And so we started the Iowa Honey Company. And in the end, it becomes a feeder company for the honey that we use in our honey whiskey and our honey vodka. And by the way, when you see that honey whiskey and that honey vodka, whether it be on the shelf or in front of you, it's not unnormal to see a little bit of wispies inside of that. Sure. That's actually a sign that that's the natural honey that tends to precipitate out. So if you ever see it, just shake the bottle up. It'll go right back up into stasis, and you're good to go.
So are there plans to bourbon barrel age any honey?
Hell yeah.
Okay, good, because I've
already got that marked on my calendar.
I have friends that do that. I have like 3 jars. I had an intern at the brewery.
Oh yeah.
Who brought me like 3 jars of bourbon barrel honey, and I've managed to slowly sneak more.
Oh yeah, I'm
working my way through it, but I'm almost like judicious of like, no, that can have the regular honey. You can't have
right the regular honey, not the special honey. Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. Sure. Yeah. So it's been a labor of love on both ends, and if you notice in our label at the very bottom, to the left under Osceola, you'll see an Art Deco B and an R next to it. That's Rob, and the one on the other side is Christy, and we're facing each other together, looking at our Revelton mark. So that's how Christy and I face everything: is looking at it and looking at it equally and together. And 2 minds are always better than one.
That's why Chris and I keep doing this. We keep on trying to get at least 2 minds to equal one on the
Hell podcast. Yeah. No, man. You guys have been awesome to talk to tonight. So
Well, Rob, I will reiterate what I said at the beginning. My admiration for you and Christy is beyond what I could express. The success that you guys have, and the just makes me very proud to call Rob Taylor my friend.
Same thing with you, Chris Shipley. You will forever be one of my very best friends, and I am so proud of you for all the adversity that you've come through, and to continue to still be a bright and shining star and be positive about people and life in the world that we live in right now. That's awesome, and I can't thank you enough. And Tim, it was awesome getting to know you tonight. You got to come down to the distillery sometime.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I know. I
got a whole group of people that are coming down there, dude.
Done.
Yeah,
let's do it.
At some point, we're going to have a bus tour this summer. My buddy Tim Heim, who was 3 years behind us. I don't know if you remember Tim Heim.
Vaguely. I bet I'd know him if I saw him.
He has a Ragbri bus, but we will take that and hit some bars and whatever. We did a winery tour, which, to your point, Tim, you're right. The wineries here in Central Iowa, not exactly great. They're not great.
Minnesota invents grapes. They have a viticulture program at the University of Minnesota, and they're still all awful. We just don't have we don't have the climate.
We're skipping those, and we're hitting bars and distilleries. So we'll be on the list. But I will tell you also, I want to make sure everybody understands. And Rob, I'll let you give the address and stuff because I've had 4 glasses of your honey whiskey, and I probably didn't mess up.
Yeah, dude, you can't feel your feet now.
I can't, dude. I can't. I got some good stuff in me when I say I can't feel my face. My wife will know that I hit the threshold. But I do this a lot with the beer bottles. I'll start staring into it, and I'll be like, I can't feel my face. That means it's good stuff. But the inside of Revelton is beautiful, and I can't imagine what it will look like during the summer when you have that back patio open and being able to sit out there.
Yeah.
But I encourage everybody, take the short trip down to Osceola, see my buddy Rob, say hi to his lovely wife, who's the better half.
Yeah, that's the God's honest truth. Yep. So we literally are 30 minutes south of Des Moines, take the Lakeside Casino exit in Osceola, and rather than turning west to go to the casino, you just turn east, go over the bridge, and we are right there. Big blue building with this beautiful copper top roof.
I do know where that is. Okay, I know exactly where that is. It just I haven't been to Osceola in years.
Yeah.
Yep. That's me. Okay, guys, I'm getting the eye from my wife that we've got to get some things done before we go to bed tonight. So, appreciate both of you. I can't wait to see or talk to you guys both again. And thanks for having me on tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, man.
Chris, fantastic guest.
Dude, that was a good episode.
I think Rob hits on all of the things that we kind of talk about regularly, whether it be about taking risks, whether it be about listening to people that have differing opinions, because he's said some things that I really appreciate. Just because you passionately defend your point of view, and just because you have strong debates, it doesn't mean that you're not listening, right?
Right.
But also that, maybe sometimes know when to shut up and listen. And I think there's a balance, and I know that I often strike the wrong part of that balance. But, he kind of hit on a lot of those things that, as much as I thought we were going to talk about whiskey, we really kind of talked about
life,
right?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now he's straight up the epitome of what I've said when I say can have a conversation with him, and anything that has to do with political views or whatever goes out the window. And that's the way it should be anymore.
Yeah, for sure.
I 20 years ago, if I'd have sat down and had a beer or had a whiskey with Rob, I wouldn't have cared what his politics was, and I wouldn't have known. And that's part of the problem with social media. I wouldn't know what their politics are.
It certainly creates an echo chamber. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, absolutely. Well, great. I mean, do you have anything else to add? Otherwise, I think we can send our listeners on their way.
I don't. I'm 4 or 5 shots in, so I may have to crawl up the stairs.
No, I think this is great. So we thank you all for joining us for this episode of Old Man Strength. Once again, please make it down to Revelton down in Osceola, Iowa. If you are anywhere near there on 1400 West Clay Street, or if you're in the neighborhood, it is not that far off of 35. You'll be able to pop in there and enjoy yourself. Or if you're like Chris, maybe you I know there are also hotels very close nearby, so make a weekend trip out of it. But we appreciate you guys listening to Old Man Strength, a podcast of the Tailgate Society. Please check us out on the web at thetailgatesociety.com. As always, a lot of great content, a lot of interesting articles ranging from sports to politics to pop culture. Every type of podcast as well that you can find, ranging from sports to politics to pop culture to just drinking. I don't know. How would you describe Bitter Units, my other podcast?
Bitter Units is I get a lot out of Bitter Units just based off of learning the brewing process or whatever. But also it pisses me off because you guys talk about all these beers and I can never try them. That's what they sound amazing. Aaron even does a nice job on there, and you know how much Aaron is.
Oh God, we're gonna make a T-shirt that says "Aaron even does a nice job." That is
That's
fantastic.
Right. Print them up, baby.
Oh, I love it. So anyway, please check us out on Twitter at strength_old. Chris is
Side grad, side dad.
Side grad, side dad. I am Tim Johnson, MN. Once again, tailgatesociety.com. Please visit our sponsor at DeadeyeBBQ.com. And we will see you guys next time.
I don't want to get on the bandwagon. I'll burn that wagon down and join the band. Traveling troubadours, terrorizing street corners just to try to get some supper in our hands. Now I waited all my life to get this off my chest, scream bloody murder until someone understands that it ain't about the money, the drugs, or the women. I make this noise just because I can. And we'll all join in to that original sin.